What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. It is officially Packers-Bears game day. Maybe we could call it the Pat O'Donnell Bowl, the Chase Claypool game. I don't know what we want to call it. I guess it's also, for the most wins in NFL regular season history, so that's kind of cool. But it's Packers-Bears, biggest rivalry in the NFL. Of course, most games played, all of that sort of stuff. The tradition is endless, so these games are always worth getting excited for. Before we jump into today's preview show, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Jimmy and Dan and Todd and Andrew and Kyle and Janelle and Matt and Eli for filling in for me this week. Had a quick trip to Charleston, South Carolina for work. Am obviously back now, but going forward should have more of a normal cadence. Hopefully, although I am still fighting this stupid cold, hopefully I will not have any more sick days or weeks coming up, and don't have any more vacations for the foreseeable future. So could always be a day here or there, but for the most part, it should get back to our normal cadence with you having to see, unfortunately, my face 365 days a year. So like I said, the normal cadence should get back here sooner rather than later. So, but again, huge thank you to all of them who pitched in and helped out. I thought they all did a tremendous job. So I hope you were able to check out those episodes in my absence. But we've got a game to cover. Again, Packers, Bears. I think the first thing I want to go over here is maybe the elephant in the room. Should we be cheering for a win or for a loss? And for some of you, it's going to be very easy answer in either direction. The first may be that, okay, you have a 2% chance at the playoffs, and until that's over with, you do everything in your power to keep fighting, which, yeah, I get that. I understand that. I don't think that's wrong, even though I don't think there's a realistic chance that this team makes the playoffs. I understand that thinking, and if you want to keep kicking and screaming and fighting until they no longer say you're eligible for the playoffs, like I said, I totally understand that. The flip side could be, well, all right, if you're fairly certain, there's a 2%-ish chance that the Packers actually make the playoffs. If you're to that point, there's a ton of value in potentially getting a top 5 pick. And certainly a top 5, top 8 pick is a lot better than a pick 10 to 15, something like that, or maybe even worse. So I understand both sides of the coin. I'll just start by saying, in general, once it gets to this point, I am almost always team tank. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying the coaches or the players should ever tank. I don't think that's a thing. I don't believe in that. No matter what, there should never be an instance or a scenario where a coach or a team of players is trying to lose a game. They should always be going out there, giving everything they have to win the game, period, end of story. It's the front office that decides if you tank or not, right? We're going to shut down Aaron Rodgers. We're going to shut down David Bakhtiari, although that's kind of happened naturally, at least for the time being. But we're going to shut down some of these veteran players. We're going to give more rookies, or younger players an opportunity to play that maybe don't give us the better opportunity to win, but we want to evaluate them. So that is a decision that you kind of make as a front office and as an organization, that we're going to kind of try out some different things and some different players that probably isn't as conducive to winning. That's probably going to pile up some losses potentially, and in the process, basically tank and get a worse record and a better draft pick in the process. So in general, that is what I would like to see the team or any team kind of do in that scenario. For whatever reason, and I can't really put my finger on it, I don't really feel that way this time. I'm kind of in the situation or the scenario of, especially now, there is still a chance at the playoffs. It's not like this. If this team decides they're going to have to rebuild, they're going to have to do some major rebuilding. And I'm just not super sold that the difference between, pick 5 and pick 15 or whatever it may be is actually going to be that great. And I am also a believer that winning breeds winning and losing breeds losing. You don't want to start getting in the habit of losing games and not making them important. That can start getting ingrained in your culture. And I do believe that the more you can press for winning, I know that, if they beat the Bears, that doesn't necessarily carry over anything in the next season. But I do think there is an important process to going out and trying to win football games and learning how to win football games. And for players like Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs and Quay Walker and Devontae Wyatt and some of these guys, Zach Tom, who have a potentially, JJ Nigbari, who potentially have a very strong future for this team, you want them to experience winning and to start being ingrained in a winning culture as well. So like I said, in most scenarios, in most situations, I usually lean team tank. For whatever reason, like I said, this year, I kind of want to see this team actually win some football games. I actually want to see them compete. I want to see them beat the Bears. I want to see them be the winningest franchise in NFL history in the regular season. All of those things. So I do think it softens the blow a little bit if you lose some of these games, especially a game against the Bears, right? Not only are you helping your draft stock, you're actually hurting the Bears draft stock. So there's like a double bonus here if you lose the game. So like I said, I want to see the team win. I'm cheering certainly for a win. I'm never going to really cheer for a team to lose. I do think it softens the blow at this point a little bit. If they do lose, that it's like, okay, well, at least that brings them further down in the standings. It hurts the Bears draft stock. So I do think there is some things baked into that. But I'll leave you with this in regards to that topic. I don't think you're wrong either way. And again, this is where I've talked about in the past. I think every person is at a different level of fandom and cares about different things. There's times in my life where like I said, it could be preseason Packers Titans, and I'm like younger in life or whatever. Like I was cheering, I wanted that Packers team to win no matter what. Didn't matter, and if they didn't win, I was bummed out by it. And I think like I said, there's been times in my life where I think there's opportunities where if the Packers lose, it might actually be better for them as a franchise because they may need the culture change. For example, the Mike McCarthy game, and when he got fired on that Cardinals game, it was so abundantly clear that the Packers just needed a change in culture that in that Cardinals game, that was really the only time when that field goal at the end missed in that Cardinals game. That was the first time and the only time to this date that I actively cheered for like I hope that Crosby was going to miss that field goal, because it just felt like if they won that game, there were a couple easy games left on the schedule. And if all of a sudden they win a few games, like maybe Mike McCarthy keeps his job and everything stays status quo. And I thought legitimately that was going to be the worst thing possible for the franchise, was just things to stay the same. So in that moment, in that game against the Cardinals and Josh Rosen, I was cheering for a missed field goal. And I didn't think they were going to fire McCarthy right after that game, but I thought it was going to be more conducive to him, to them making a change at the head coaching position at the end of the season. So long story short, I think there's all different ways to go about this. And if you're going into this game saying, hey, I think it's legitimately better if the Packers lose this game, better draft pick, worst draft pick for the Bears. They are going to need a ton of young talent moving forward into future seasons. This season's done with. I get it. I understand it. Not going to argue against you. If you're of the mindset of Andy, winning breeds winning, like you just said, or I don't even care. They need to beat the Bears. It's Packers Bears. This is tradition. This is rivalry. This means something. Or if every time the Packers go out and put the G on their helmet, you want to see them win the football game, whether they're 0-16 or 16-0 or anything in between, meaning there's a game to be played yet, obviously. I understand it. I get it. I totally understand it. So again, I think wherever you are in that spectrum, and there's a lot of middle ground there too, I'm with you. I understand it. I get it. For me, I'm cheering for the Packers to win this game. But certainly, like I said, you do you and figure out where you are and cheer accordingly in this game. And I understand it either way. A couple moves before we get into the breakdown of this game. Micah Abernathy and Patrick Taylor were elevated from the practice squad. One other move that was not made, and kudos to Bill Huber for calling this out, Tipa Naliai was not activated off of injured reserve, so he is now officially out for the season. They had opened his practice window. Sounds like, according to Bill, that he had a setback at some point, and they did not activate him in time, so he now will be out for the season. So a lost season for Tipa Naliai. Did not play any snaps this season on defense, so definitely a bummer. It looked at like at one point he was maybe going to be one of the top backups at edge rusher on this team going into the season. That never really materialized. JJ Nigbari stepped up, then Tipa got hurt, and the rest was sort of history. So Tipa now out for the season. We will see if he can make a push to make a roster next year, and that will be the next thing that we probably discuss about Tipa Naliai, if we're being real. All right, so next up, my 10 things for this game, as I do every single week. I'll go through the 10 things that I'm going to be watching, kind of the keys to the game. And then, of course, I'll go over my prediction as well. number one and number two, we can just combine into one. It's the low-hanging fruit. It's the most obvious thing in the world. It's containing Justin Fields, right? We don't need to go back far at all to understand just how bad the Packers were at stopping Jalen Hurts and running the football just last week. Now, Justin Fields coming in healthy, at least he's healthy enough to play, and you got to think that they are going to look at that tape that the Eagles put on against the Packers and follow a very similar, they don't even need to put on the tape. That's their game plan anyway, right? It's to run Justin Fields, it's to run David Montgomery, and that's what they want to do on almost every single play. But they just saw what the Eagles were able to do. They are going to be licking their chops to being able to play this Packers defense, and it's up to the Packers to be a billion times better against Justin Fields, who might be probably a better running quarterback than Jalen Hurts is, although it's close. And if you want to argue Hurts, I won't argue against you either. But either way, this is lining up to be a dream matchup for Fields and Montgomery and the Bears offense, and another nightmare matchup in a lot of ways for the Packers defense. Now, they don't have an A.J. Brown on the outside that you have to worry about quite as much, but I don't even know that necessarily matters. The Bears have an interesting group of weapons. All of them have the ability to beat you on any given play. None of them are likely going to beat you consistently. Like I said, this is the Chase Claypool game, so who knows? Maybe Claypool will go off big, but overall, this is all going to be about stopping and containing Justin Fields and David Montgomery. Number two, I said I was going to combine them together, is just tackling, right? This team tackled so horribly last week against the Eagles. I'm not sure I've ever seen a game like it, and a lot of that was due to Jalen Hurts, Miles Sanders. Remember, the last time this team played David Montgomery only got 15 carries. He had 122 yards on the ground on those 15 carries, 8.1 yards per carry. And the Bears lost that game. It was like 27-10, I think it was. But they still were able to run Montgomery 15 times for 122 yards. And they didn't even really have the threat as much of Justin Fields at that time. They weren't running him around as much. So now you've got the threat of Justin Fields, which is an insane threat on the ground. And now you match that with a running back that you struggled to tackle in week two, when you had Rashawn Gary, when you had Kenny Clark playing really well. We'll see if Devondre Campbell plays in this game, of course. But you had those guys in week two, and you couldn't stop Montgomery on just 15 carries. He had 122 yards. Montgomery could get 30 carries in this game. It would not shock me. And Fields could get another 20, and that would not shock me. So the Packers, their run defense, how they contain Justin Fields, and how they tackle is going to be paramount to their success in this game. And the other thing I will say too is how they got beat so badly against specifically Jalen Hurts. That obviously what the Eagles were able to do in that game overall with Miles Sanders and Hurts in that entire running game, they were able to do a ton of things against the Packers. They had a very sophisticated running attack. But one of the big issues specifically against Jalen Hurts was that they lost contain over and over and over. There would be plays that Joe Barry had drawn up that was specifically set to contain Jalen Hurts in the pocket, and the edge rusher or the defender or the corner gets caught inside and Hurts just escapes to the outside. It was brutally bad. So I know it's lame, I know it's cliche, but sometimes it is doing your 111th. It's doing your job. And this is a team game. And that's one of the things that this Packers defense has struggled with all season long. And I mentioned it earlier this week. It's 11 guys playing individual defense rather than playing a team defense that rallies to the football, that tackles as a team, that moves as a team. That was one of the things early last season under Joe Barry, is you could see this defense moving as a team, especially when they rallied to the football, especially when they in the running game where they again would rally and just kind of team tackle, I guess is how I would say it. So you would see that last year. You haven't seen that this year. So that is going to be a huge aspect, but it's going to take guys just doing their job. If your job is to not allow a player to get to the outside and just contain Justin Fields in the pocket, you cannot get sucked inside, which we saw over and over against the Eagles. So those are the two biggest keys by far, containing Justin Fields and just overall tackling, because David Montgomery and Justin Fields will run the Packers over if we see a similar tackling display that we did against the Eagles in this game against the Bears. Number 3 is, how does the Packers offensive line hold up without David Bakhtiari? So a frustrating injury to Bakhtiari with the appendix having to be removed. This offensive line, kind of quietly over the last 3 weeks, and I know I brought attention to it earlier this week, but this offensive line has been playing so much better. Not perfect, still up and down, struggled against the Titans a little bit, but Bakhtiari, Jenkins, Myers, Runyon, Nyman has really solidified this line. And the biggest piece of that, by far and away, was David Bakhtiari and what he was doing. He was basically playing at a Pro Bowl level. I wouldn't say all pro, but probably a Pro Bowl level. I know the Pro Bowl doesn't exactly exist anymore, but I would say he's playing at a Pro Bowl level prior to this this most recent injury. So losing him, and I don't even need to tell you, he was by far and away the best of the 5 Packers offensive linemen since he's gotten back. Again, not even close. So losing that guy in this game is certainly a bummer. And it was just really nice to see the same 5 guys going out every week and those guys getting a rhythm together and playing together week after week. My assumption is that it's going to be Zach Tom at left tackle and everything else will just stay the same, but we'll have to see. They could move Yash back to left. They could do something with Royce Newman. We'll see. I would expect this to be Zach Tom at left tackle. I would be pretty surprised if it wasn't, but that's going to be a key in this game. And then just how do they play together without David Bakhtiari, the guy that has been anchoring their offensive line, the ace of their offensive line. You lose a guy like that and it just breaks everything down. Now, the Bears don't have a great front to take advantage of it a ton, but you lose a guy like that and you can get beat, right? Zach Tom is going to struggle probably a little bit with strength. I really like Zach Tom. I like what he can do potentially at left tackle, so I'm excited to watch him play in this game, assuming that it's him. But that's a huge loss for the Packers with Bakhtiari and how this offensive line responds. There's reasons that this team has been able to throw deeper down the field, hit some of those more in-breaking routes over the middle of the field. The offensive line has formed a pocket for Aaron Rodgers better than they have all season long over the course of the last few weeks. And again, a huge piece of that is David Bakhtiari. So how does whoever it is, likely Zach Tom, step up in his absence, and how does this line gel together with him being out? Number 4 on my list, what do the Bears have left to give? Darnell Mooney and Eddie Jackson both go on IR this week. They already traded away Robert Quinn. They already traded away Roquan Smith. Jaquan Brisker, their top rookie this year. Kyler Gordon, their other top rookie this year. Larry Borum are all out this week for this game. Khalil Herbert's on IR. This is just a team that came into the season lacking talent pretty significantly to be able to compete at any sort of high level. And then you have all of these trades and injuries that go into it as well. And it just feels like this week with Mooney and Jackson going out and having to go on IR, and then losing your 2 top rookie defensive backs for this week at least in Brisker and Gordon, it just feels like that is a lot to swallow. Not to mention the trade of your 2 top defenders, and Mack in the offseason is another one. So this is a team that has lost. Even though they lack talent coming in, the talent that they did have is they've lost throughout the course of the season. So it's not to say that Green Bay hasn't had to deal with injuries as well. We don't need to go any further than Rashawn Gary to see, a huge impact player that won't be playing in this game for the Packers. David Bakhtiari on the other side of the ball. So I'm not saying, it's really tough on the Bears, but when you factor in the trades, the injuries, and a team that didn't have that much talent to begin with, they're on a losing team that's lost a lot of games. At some point that just starts weighing on you, and that the finish line starts getting closer and closer, and maybe the effort, the energy that you put in weeks 1 through 10 isn't quite there in those last handful of weeks of the season. I think the Bears are going to give everything. Justin Fields is playing in this game. They rally around him, and I think they're going to make this very difficult for the Packers, but they've lost a lot. And I think that could potentially very much hurt them. So what more do they have to give? We are going to find out in this game. Number 5, I think Green Bay is going to really have to attack those Chicago defensive backs. We just talked about the injuries to Brisker and Gordon, but they basically are down to Jalen Johnson and a bunch of stuff. Because Jalen Johnson is their really good corner. He will be starting, of course, but you can kind of just avoid him if you want. Jalen Jones probably going to be holding down the fort at one of those other corner positions. Kindle Vilder, who is their other starter at this point, is questionable in this game. So we don't even know if he's going to play. DeAndre Houston Carson is filling in for Eddie Jackson and the rest of the safeties. They elevated Harrison Hand and Adrian Colbert this week. And then guys like A.J. Thomas, Elijah Hicks, Josh Blackwell. This is not your normal secondary for the Bears. And I actually like what Jalen Jones has done a little bit as an undrafted free agent rookie. But like if that's your next guy up as your number 2, it's an undrafted free agent rookie, you have some opportunities to attack. And it could be the week that they actually get Watson and Dobbs on the field at the same time. And if that's the case, this should be a great matchup for the Packers, and actually having, for maybe the first time all season, a wide receiver group that you feel very confident can just go out and beat the defensive backs across for them. So I think this is a week to attack those corners. I'm not saying get away from the run. I'm not saying go 11 and just get in your static formations and go out and play. I think that'd be a really bad idea, but I do think you can attack this Bears secondary, and I do think that's something that the Packers are going to have to take advantage of. Number 6 on my list could probably be number 1 because it is a huge story in this game as well. But just how healthy is Aaron Rodgers? Do you need to manage him? Is he fully functional? Is he able to throw on a dime, well down the field on some of those deep balls to Christian Watson and Romeo Dobbs? Those are the things that I think are going to be worth watching. And if he does take a big hit to the ribs, if he does hit his thumb, is this something that could bother him or force him to really struggle throughout the course of this game? Or even if he doesn't, if he's at 80%, how much does that affect the Packers in this game? Because we've seen Aaron Rodgers, even with just the thumb, not always have the accuracy that we're accustomed to with him. If all of a sudden the ribs are giving him issues too, that could be an issue. And I think the bigger thing here that's really worth monitoring is I think people forget sometimes that taking a hit from a defensive lineman is part of the job description for a quarterback. And that might seem a little bit weird at times, like, yeah, you don't want to do that. But at some point, in order to hit that ball down the field, you got to know that that defense is coming through. But in order to deliver it, you got to hang in the pocket, throw that ball downfield, keep your eyes downfield, know that you're going to get crushed, but that ball is going to be in a spot where you can score an explosive play or maybe even a touchdown on it. That's part of the job description. Those are job description throws for a quarterback. If you've got injured ribs and you start wanting to avoid those hits throughout the course of a game, and all of a sudden David Bakhtiari's out, what can happen? Quarterback, especially at age, 38, 39? I know he just had his birthday. I think 38. Either way, the eyes start dropping and you start watching the offensive line. You don't necessarily see your progressions down the field as well. And you start trying to maybe buy time and run around, and we start seeing a lot of those Aaron Rodgers throws out of bounds. That can start happening if you want to start avoiding those hits. If all of a sudden Zach Tom starts getting beat a couple times, or who's ever at left tackle starts getting beat a couple times, again, those eyes will start dropping. If that first hit he takes, it reminds him, oh, geez, this is going to be a long game. If I keep taking those hits, eyes start dropping down. So it's not just whether or not he's able to go and play and if he starts wanting to avoid taking some of those shots, that can really change how this offense plays. So that will be worth monitoring and noting as the game goes along as well. Number 7, you can't pull a Packers special teams in this one. Now, to be fair, Keyshawn Nixon, a really big bright spot in the game last week. If he can keep that up, maybe the special teams can absolutely be a difference maker in this one. This is a game, maybe rarely for the Packers this season, where they have the better offense. They probably still have the better defense, although I'm not willing to put the Packers defense ahead of maybe anyone right now, but probably still have the better defense. They have more to fight for in this game, although it's not by much. And the one thing that could maybe really trip you up is if your special team screws things up again. I do feel more comfortable with Keyshawn Nixon as your returner, as both a punt returner and a kick returner, but this is still a special teams that finds ways to leave points on the field. Even Keyshawn Nixon had a return to the 9-yard line last week. You get basically a Mason Crosby missed extra point almost every week, or a blocked extra point. The special teams has allowed blocked punts. They've allowed big returns. You just can't go all Packers special teams in this game. If you want to win this one, just be competent. We're back to that for the special teams. We're not asking for good. We're not asking for great. We're just asking for competent. It's a huge ask because you haven't done it almost ever, but you need the special teams to not be the Packers special teams in this one and keep this about the offense and the defense. Number 8, need to see a little bit more impact from Kenny Clark. Probably the roughest stretch of his career over the last 5 weeks. Just some really rough football for him. Yes, he's getting double teamed more. Yes, they're paying more attention to him. Clearly goes without saying, but he just has to find ways to be better. And I'm not asking him to split double teams. Listen, if he's double teamed and he's just kind of holding up at the point of attack, that is a win. I'm not asking for superhuman stuff here. But when you're blocked one-on-one with a center or guard on this Bears team, you got to win those matchups. And I know Cody Whitehair, pretty technically sound, and their interior's okay. Tevin Jenkins has been, I think, is taking a major step this season. That goes without saying. But overall, Kenny Clark has to play a lot better, especially with Rashawn Gary out. Clark has to be the star up front. More often than not, as I've said a million times, this defense usually goes as Kenny Clark goes. He's been really bad the last 5 weeks. This defense has been really bad for the most part the last 5 weeks. So they need more impact from Kenny Clark. Number 9, it is December. It is officially A.J. Dillon season. This is where A.J. Dillon starts becoming a lot more uncomfortable to tackle him. It's not a mistake. I don't think that we saw the best A.J. Dillon last week. He had 8 carries, 64 yards, looked the best that we've seen Dillon. He also had 3 catches for 24 yards, so 88 yards on the day on only 11 touches, 8 yards per touch. And against the Bears in week 2, he had probably his most touches in the season. He had 18 rushes alone. I know he had a couple catches in that one as well. He only had 61 yards against the Bears, but again, this is A.J. Dillon's season. I want to see him carry over the success he had against the Eagles into this game. It's one of those games for the Bears. That game starts getting longer and that game starts getting colder, and A.J. Dillon's running right at you. You can start seeing some business decisions from this Bears defense. Want to see that stacked success from A.J. Dillon after a big week a week ago against the Eagles. And last but not least, number 10, if you're the Packers, you can't look ahead to that bye week because, yes, it is very easy to do so. You've had a very long and brutal season. You're sitting at 4-8. You're playing in Chicago in the cold, probably in the wind, not ideal conditions. And that bye week and getting some time off, probably getting to go home for a little bit, probably go somewhere warmer. That's just around the corner, and getting a much needed rest from this season that's just been so brutal. If you go into that bye with a win, probably feels a lot better, but it's very easy to look ahead, especially when you've played so many games in a row and traveled to London and done all those things. Start looking ahead to that bye, maybe not concentrating or focusing quite as much. You can't just take this Bears team for granted. They are better than you think, even though their record has not been good, even though they've lost so many players via injury, trade, etc. This is still a team, the way that Justin Fields is playing, that can beat you. And if you're still hoping on that 2% chance to make the playoffs, then you got to win this game, and you can't overlook this game and start looking ahead to the bye week. All right, those are my 10 keys and just things that I'm going to be watching in this game. I'm half tempted to pick a 24-24 Packers-Bears tie. It just sort of feels like what could happen. That's the one thing that hasn't happened yet in this Packers season. That would just be that. Remember when I told you at the beginning that if you're cheering for a loss, I get it. If you're cheering for a win, I get it. Well, I don't think anybody would be cheering for a tie, especially more overtime. Nobody wants that. So that would just seem to be the last kick in the nuts that this team could probably take, is a 24-24 tie where it doesn't really help your draft position. It doesn't actually win you a football game, and it just feels like the dumbest thing ever. So part of me wants to just predict the 24-24 tie, but I'm going to say Packers 28, Bears 23. They pick up a 5-point win on the road, keep their slim playoff chances alive, and finally get that bye that they need. They needed 10 weeks ago, probably, if we're being real. So appreciate you joining me. I will be right back here tomorrow, I think with Perry and Alex, to break down the game, but if they're not available, it'll just be me. Either way, we'll have everything covered for you, so make sure to check that out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Enjoy this Bears-Packers game, but until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.